In this next tape, we are now going to discuss probably one of the most special parts of the recovery program. In the 8th and 9th steps, we learn to get in touch with and to settle things in our life. So many of us, as a result of addictions or as a result of our codependency or as a result of situations that have occurred in our childhood, so many of us have so many loose ends. We have so many areas of our life that need to be pulled together, that need to be settled. So many of us also have relationships and situations in our life that very basically either have ended or still are in between. That's why these two steps, at the end of the working steps, steps 4 through 9, these are the very special steps that help us to begin to clean up our house, to settle things, and to put things to rest. Again, try to relate back to, as we looked at the steps up to this point. In the first 3 steps, we looked at the whole concept of looking at ourselves from a positive perspective, beginning to change the vision of ourself, beginning to see the beautiful affirming qualities that we have within, learning to let go, learning to open up, learning to be honest. In the 4th and the 5th step, we learned how to find out who we are, how to develop a good healthy inventory. And then we also learned in the 4th and 5th step how to trust, how to reach out, how to touch. Now in the 6th and 7th step, we also learned that it's okay to look back, to grieve, to heal, to release, to let go of those people in our lives that many times we blamed, that many times we basically used to keep us from really looking at ourselves. We learned in the 6th and 7th step the importance of forgiveness, the importance of healing. Now in the 8th and 9th step, in a very concrete way, we now learn how to make amends. And then we also learn one of the most beautiful things, one of the hardest things for all of us as human beings, how to become our own best friend, how to develop a beautiful friendship with ourselves, how to begin to look at ourselves as a total person, how to begin to really nurture and nourish ourselves, and how to begin to assume the responsibility for our own life. On this spiritual journey that we've been talking about, we talked about the simplicity of what life really is. And one of the most important aspects of life is to clean out and clear things so that we'll be able to live life in serenity and peacefulness and gentleness. In the 8th step, we make a list of all the people we may have injured or harmed. In the 9th step, we make direct amends to them whenever it's humanly possible, making sure that we do not injure ourselves or injure or harm anyone else. As a result of many of our dysfunctionalities and many of our situations in life, many of us have experienced tremendous amounts of hurt. And even in our anger and our frustration, what we have done is we've given hurt back. We've hurt others. This is part of the process of life. In these 2 steps, we have to learn how to make amends. And I emphasize the word learn. It's a learning process because it's extremely hard for us to be able to do things that we're not used to doing. So many times what we've done in the past, instead of straightening things out and settling them, we just simply put them in the back of our mind, block them out, shut them off, and decided they no longer existed. And yet deep down inside, they're still there. Deep down inside, there's that little gnawing feeling. There's that little concept that just isn't settled. And it's so nice to be able to live your life in a settled atmosphere, in a peaceful atmosphere. And so these 2 steps become extremely important, but I want to emphasize something before I really get into them, that these 2 steps basically are number 8 and number 9. See, so many times in our lives, we very basically want to always straighten things out with other people. We always want to make amends. But the program teaches us to work on ourselves first, to make peace inside of us. Even in the 8th and 9th step, we are taught a very basic and beautiful principle, which is hard to understand, and that's why I want to spend some time on it. When we make amends, it is not important whether the other individuals or the other persons really make peace with us or not. The importance of the 8th and 9th step is to settle things inside of us, to make peace within. You see, we have to make amends with ourselves, and that is all that counts. We are totally powerless, as the first step taught us, over anyone else. We can't make other people become peaceful with us. So many times, especially for codependency, when it comes to these two steps, so many codependents really want to get in touch with their families, make peace with their families, straighten things out with their families. And maybe we can do that indirectly, but many times we can't do it directly. Because again, we have to learn the very simple principle that this entire program teaches us. And it revolves around a very simple and beautiful prayer. And that prayer is, of course, the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity. Grant me the inner peace, the inner settledness, to be able to accept the things I cannot change. That statement in itself is very difficult and very hard. To be able to accept the things I cannot change. I cannot change another human being. I am totally powerless over other human beings. I cannot make them become what I think they should become. I cannot control their lives. I am powerless over them. And that prayer rings out so strongly because, especially as codependents, one of the things that we do constantly in life is we always want people to be what we think they should be, what we want them to be. And it's sad because very many times we look at people and we see how they're wrecking their lives. We see the things that are happening to them and we try our best. But in reality, sometimes we just have to let go and let the higher power take care of it. So grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. Courage. Courage is a very special and a very beautiful word that centralizes around the 8th and the 9th step. In these two steps, we learn what courage really is. Courage doesn't mean to do something crazy. It's not a courageous act to jump off a cliff. It's not courageous to do something that's dangerous. Courage is very beautifully and very specially being able to be who you are, to acknowledge the beauty of yourself, the courage to be in the honesty of your own person. That's what's so beautiful about this prayer, because it's the courage to change the things I can. One of the hardest things for all of us to do, one of the hardest things of life, is to change. Change is scary. And yet when we change, we let go. When we change, we allow new things to develop in the course of our life. And so it's very difficult for us sometimes to change the things I can, because the only thing we can change in this world is ourselves, is our attitudes, is who we are. See, we learned something very special in this program, that I am the only one that I can work on. I must work on me. And if I work on myself and develop myself and build a very beautiful spiritual base inside of myself, then automatically and naturally, I will be able to connect to people around me. We know the old saying, if you are healthy and if you do healthy things for you, then you will attract to you healthy people. If you do negative things to your life and you beat yourself up, then you will attract people to you that will treat you negatively and beat you up also. See, again, we attract what's going on inside of us. And that's why it's so important in this recovery program to be at peace inside, to be at peace internally. In the 8th step, they tell us to make a list of all the people we have injured and all the people we have harmed. And again, look at the wisdom of this program and the wisdom of this step. In this step, they're telling us to sit down and make a list. They're telling us to look at the reality of people and situations and places in our life. And that list should include not only the people that we've injured or harmed, but it should also include a list of all the different situations that somehow and in some way gnaw at us on the inside. Things that we have to get settled. Things we need to make peace with. It's nice to make a list, because when you make a list, it becomes concrete. It becomes real. And all of a sudden it comes out of us, and it's right in front of us. As you make that list, try to remember one basic thing, that there should be on that list yourself. Because the purpose of this step is to make peace with you inside. Again, the step warns us, and the step tells us to work on your own self, to develop a peaceful concept of you. And so again, I may be ready at this stage of my growth and this stage of my recovery to make peace, to settle things deep inside. But in reality, other people may not be ready. Other situations, it may not be possible for me to be involved in them. And that's why it's so important in this step to learn two basic concepts. First of all, we have to learn how to make what we call direct amends and indirect amends. Now again, listen to two basic principles which are really important. The step tells us, do not injure yourself. Secondly, the step tells us, do not injure anyone else. What does that mean? It means that simply our responsibility in recovery is from now on, one day at a time, to continuously put ourselves in positive situations, to be involved only with people where we can grow and experience positive stuff in our life, and not to put ourselves in circumstances or situations that basically will downgrade us or tear us apart or bring back the old ways. The reason why they tell us this is because so many times as recovering people, one of the things that we do is that we are constantly wanting to beat ourselves up. See, remember the whole center and the core and the concept of addiction that we talked about way back in the first talk. Addicts are basically people who don't like who they are. And because of our guilt and because of our fear, what happens is we get this tendency of looking to beat ourselves up, looking to put ourselves in situations where we'll get some more pain, looking to put ourselves around people because we're waiting for them to say, it's okay. See, again, so many times because of our guilt, we very basically are always trying to get people to make peace with us. And if we approach them and make peace with them, then we want them to be able to accept us. And that's why very many times we put ourselves in jeopardy. I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman I knew quite a few years ago who during his marriage to his wife and his daughter made a very major decision in their life. He was an alcoholic. And it was kind of interesting because what happened was he very basically was in his active addiction, and as a result, his relationship with his wife and his daughter was not very well. And so what happened after a period of time, he basically couldn't deal with addiction anymore, neither could his wife, and neither could his daughter. So his wife and daughter made a very major decision. They decided that they had enough. And so after years and years of putting up with this, his wife finally decided to leave him, to get a divorce, take his daughter, and they moved to another state. 3.5 years after he got his divorce, all of a sudden he decided to get sober. He went into a treatment program, he got his act together, and he finally got himself put together. Now, he was sober about maybe 7 or 8 weeks. He then decided that since he's sober, he headed up to where his wife was now living, and his wife was remarried, and he arrived at her front door, and he knocked on the door and he said to her, I'm sober, I'm doing good, I love you, come home. See, when we talk about making amends, that is not what we're talking about. As a result of his visit to his wife, he ended up spending the night in jail. His wife did not appreciate his visit. We have to learn to let things that have happened to us in our life, our history, to let them go. We have to learn to become peaceful inside, to settle things inside of us, to develop a sense of inner peace so that we can let it go and turn it over. In many, many situations, we have to learn the positive ways of making amends. Again, for this reason and because of this example, I share with people in the 8th and 9th step the importance and the very important concept of never doing this step alone. Remember, I have a nickname for this step. It's called the common sense step. It's the step whereby I look at situations in my life not through the eyes of guilt. Again, that's why it's number 8 and number 9, not 1 and 2. I also look at the situation so that I can now begin to experience, and I can begin to release, and I can begin to make peace inside of me. My inside peace is the gift of these 2 steps. Again, what I have to learn is the difference between what we call in the program direct amends and indirect amends. Now, let me try to make this as clear as possible. Direct amends in the program usually occurs about 20% of the time, not that often. Direct amends simply means that there are people in our life, there are circumstances in our life where there are individuals who have been waiting for years and years and years and years for us to make amends. They have been just there, waiting in the background. And now, all of a sudden, when we begin to work on ourselves, there is a real sense of them being open to working together with us. In that situation, it's a very healthy thing. Then we can directly get together with those people, talk to them, share with them, ask forgiveness, do healing, work things out. Now, sometimes this does happen, but in many, many, many circumstances, especially in the eyes, especially of codependency, this is not possible. Remember, if you have experienced many of the issues of your little child, if you have experienced the terror of your little child, you no longer are going to put your little child into any type of terror or any type of negative situation. Now what we are going to do is we're going to learn how to make what we call in the program indirect amends. Again, indirect amends are geared towards settling things inside of us, making peace within. If we learn this concept, then we learn recovery. Let me give you some real clear-cut examples of what we call indirect amends. For example, there's a gentleman that I've known for a while who basically has been in the program about 11 years. When he was in his active addiction, he was involved in a stabbing and a killing. He ended up hurting someone and killing someone. He was together with other drug addicts, and there was a fight and a battle over drugs. Now, when it comes time for him to make amends, he is now 11 to 12 years sober. He is married, he has children, he's doing well, he's a paramedic, he has a real beautiful concept of himself. And yet, deep down inside, there's this gnawing, there's this feeling, there's these things that go on inside of him that somehow, some way, he has to make peace with what he did. Making amends does not mean that he runs to the police department, knocks on the door, and tells them that he's the one that did this 11 years ago. Making amends for him very simply means that he has to sit down with someone in the program. When we sat down with him, we helped him to work out what we call an amends plan. In his case, what he does is he takes his talents, the things that he can do, and what he does is he donates 4 hours of his time each week, 20 hours a month, to a children's hospital, and as a paramedic, he does free service for them in their emergency room. See, again, what he's doing is taking his talent as a paramedic, and he's helping other people to live. And in doing that, he's making amends for the life that he took. See, again, in this concept, he is using common sense. He is using balance. He is learning in this concept not to put himself in jeopardy. He is learning to make peace inside of him. See, again, all we can do in these circumstances, in these types of situations, is learn how to make peace. Learn how to settle things inside of us. Many of us may have experienced either incest situations or maybe even being molested. As a result of this concept, we do not expect you to go back and talk to the individual, and talk to the person that did this to you. If it's possible, And if it's a healthy situation, and if it can be done, okay. But normally speaking, usually to put yourself back in that situation and around those people is to put yourself in more jeopardy, to put yourself in a negative situation. So in this type of situation, what we do is we simply have you make peace inside of yourself. Let go. We have you again use either the letter writing technique, or we have you use someone in the program with whom you can role model and settle things and make peace. One of the things we recommend very strongly in the amends steps for codependents especially is to use people from the program as models. For example, if I need to talk something out, to settle it, to get it out of me, to release it, what I can do is ask someone in the program to play a role for me, to play this role for me in my life, so that I can now talk about it and release it and let it go. And the more I learn to share, the more I learn to let things out, the more I no longer keep it inside. It's like anything else. Eventually, it will go away, and eventually, peace will come. Other examples of indirect amends is a gentleman that I know who in his active addiction stole about $5,000 from a particular Catholic church. What he did was, in his active addiction, he took a pistol and he stuck up the priest and basically stole $5,000 from him. Now, he has 7.5 to 8 years sobriety. He's doing extremely well in the program. We do not expect him to go knocking on the door and saying, "Here I am." So in his case, we had him write a letter anonymously to the particular clergyman that he held up at gunpoint, apologizing to him, telling him how sorry that he is, and basically letting him know that he wants to make peace on the inside. Also, what we then had him do is he mails a cashier's check for a certain amount of money each month to the church until he pays back the money that he took. See, again, understand the process of this. We are helping this individual and helping this gentleman to make peace and make amends. He is settling his accounts. He is settling situations inside of him. But at the same time, he is not putting himself in jeopardy. He is doing things anonymously, and he is following the good sense and the good guideline of the 12-step program. See, again, we have to learn that we don't put ourselves in situations that are going to hurt us or damage us. And that's why it's so important to be able to work this step, in a sense, with other people so that we get proper advice and proper guidance. Another typical example of indirect amends is especially with someone who maybe has died in our life. See, again, sometimes people that we need to make amends to no longer exist. They are not around anymore. And so many times we need to look at these individuals and we need to be able to say to them the things we need to say. Because deep down inside of us, we still carry the same feelings. I'll give you a typical example. We had a gentleman that I knew from North Philadelphia who, in his active addiction, did a lot of damage to his mother. In his active addiction, he stole from his mother. He beat his mother up, called her all kinds of names, told her he couldn't stand her. And this went on for years and years and years. He literally bled his mother dry. He volunteered and went away in the service, and he went to Vietnam. While he was in Vietnam, he received a letter stating that his mother had died. Still in his active addiction, as far as he was concerned, all he said was, "Good riddance, I'm glad she's gone." The bitterness and the anger was deep inside of him. In coming back from Vietnam through the Vietnam Veterans Program, he was able to get involved in a treatment program, and he was able to basically get himself straightened out. After he was sober and after he had worked on his issues and his life became more manageable, we sat down and we talked. And he said to me that he had a lot of pain going on inside of him, a lot of hurt. And a lot of that hurt and a lot of that pain was over his mom. And so what I did was I asked him to sit down, and I asked him to write a love letter to his mom, asking her forgiveness and asking for her love. After he wrote the letter, then we got some of the people from the program together, and we took him out to his mother's gravesite. And at his mother's gravesite, he had the opportunity with the rest of us there to read the letter out loud to his mother, to express his feelings, to let everything come out of him. And then together we had a little prayer service at the gravesite, and he buried the letter, and he made peace with his mom inside. There are so many areas in our life that are just not completed. There are so many areas that we need to look at, that we need to work on. There are so many areas in our life that we have to settle. And that's why these 2 steps are so important. Because as we do this concept, what happens is it begins to rip us apart. It begins to tear us to shreds. It's extremely important that we learn how to make amends, that we learn how to make peace, that we learn how to work on these things for ourselves. In this program, we are taught this, and we are taught to take care of ourselves. We now begin to look at that beautiful concept of developing a healthy self, that concept of making friends with ourselves. From the program, we learn this, and from the program, we discover these beautiful concepts within. As we now begin to look at the amends steps, we begin to realize how much each of us can learn and grow from this concept of settling things and making peace inside. The beautiful part of this program also teaches us the importance of developing a relationship with ourselves, of developing a concept of who we are. In the program, each of us now begins to work on the real concept and the real philosophy of the 8th and 9th step. The purpose of the step is for each of us to learn how to make friends with ourselves. As you build a personal friendship with you, and so many of us have never done this, we now begin to realize how important it is to work on this issue. See, again, learning how to make amends teaches me something. And the program right up to this point, and you'll notice again in the philosophy of the program, the first 11 steps in the program are geared primarily towards the development of our own personhood, the development of ourself. In this program, we actually begin to learn and we begin to discover the beautiful concepts of who we are. As we now begin to work on these issues, we begin to learn something about our personhood. So many of us have never developed what I call the private us. There is a part of us that each and every one of us must work on constantly, and that is to develop that specialness of who we are. If you remember back in the days of our insanity and our craziness, so many of us were empty, so many of us were lonely, so many of us never experienced the fullness of ourself. In this program, we learn to fill our cup. See, one of the things, I'll use an analogy to bring this out. One of the things that's very difficult for us and hard for us to do is, in the past, whenever we felt empty and we felt lonely, what we usually did was we drained other people. We pulled everything from other people. Now, in this program of recovery, we learn something new. In this program, we learn to fill our own cup. Now, remember that concept, to fill your own cup. As I work and fill myself and develop this peacefulness inside of me, then basically my cup will then overflow. The overflow I share with others, but what's in my cup is mine. What this means is that each and every one of us in this program of recovery have to begin to develop a sense of me. You see, there's a part of me, a very special part of me, that I share with no one. It belongs to me. And I worked very hard and worked for a long period of time in this recovery program to discover this special part of me. The only person I share this with is my higher power. It means that I am allowed to have, and I am allowed to develop inside of me, my own private self, my own personal relationship, my own concept of me. What's also beautiful about this process is that as I begin to learn this, I begin to realize that I don't have to give myself away. You see, learning to make friends with yourself means to begin to really experience that process of keeping part for you, of developing this relationship, and that this uniqueness belongs to you. So as a result of recovery, we are now able to experience what we call in the program our aloneness. Again, relate to this, because in the early stages we experience a lot of loneliness. There's a big difference between aloneness and loneliness. Loneliness is emptiness. Loneliness is boredom. Loneliness tears us apart. Aloneness is specialness. Aloneness is being able to be with ourself and be at peace. Aloneness means to experience the special part of just me. Aloneness means that I basically can function and I can deal, and I am now building a beautiful sense of serenity and peacefulness inside of me. As I then begin to experience the beautiful concept of this, I am beginning to realize that I appreciate and I actually enjoy my aloneness. I enjoy my specialness. In the program, we have a name for this. We call it maturity, and we call it responsibility. So many of us are scared to experience what I call the growth process in life. Remember, we talked a lot in these talks about the little kid, the little child. In recovery now, we also talk about the adult. And remember that recovery is a balance. Recovery is the little kid and the adult learning to relate to each other and be part of each other. In recovery, it also means that I begin to build inside of myself a sense of settledness and a sense of peacefulness, a sense of things that belong to me. I now begin to develop my connections and my concepts and the things around me. See, so many of us take so much for granted. So many of us forget the very basic needs that we have as persons. So many of us fail to realize that we have to learn to live with ourself and live in peace. As we begin and continue to work on ourselves, we realize that this beautiful part of the 8th and 9th step is to help us to get in touch with that part of us that was lacking as we began our development in life. That part of us called our spirit and our spirituality. In this process of the step, we now begin to realize how important it is to begin to build our spiritual foundations and our spiritual basis. We learn in the 8th and 9th step by making amends and by making peace. We learn a very simple and a very beautiful concept of recovery. We learn to begin to mix and develop what we call the spirituality of recovery. You see, one of our major responsibilities, and again, the step tells us, do not injure yourself or injure or harm anybody else. In this particular part of the program, we learn and develop what we call our serenity, what we call our spirit, and our spirituality. In the first stage of our spirituality, we learn a very simple and beautiful principle as we develop this friendship with ourself. See, spirituality simply and basically means to build a personal relationship and a personal friendship with self. In simple terms, we relate this to learning to love ourselves. See, one of the things that's difficult for us to do, it's very difficult for us to fall in love with ourselves. It's very difficult for us to build that very personal relationship with us. We are very much used to doing this with others. It's amazing how we are as human beings. We always want to give stuff to other people. We always want to give stuff away. Instead of realizing and savoring and enjoying and celebrating the beautiful gift of love inside of us. You see, in each and every one of us as human beings, we have a very powerful and a very beautiful energy. That energy is our love. That energy needs to be tapped and brought alive. So many times we are so busy and so anxious, and we're so depressed, and we're driving ourselves crazy because we're always on the run. We never take time to begin to experience the beautiful concept of personal love, to be able actually to be in love with you. Are you able to look at yourself and realize the beauty of your own personal love? Do you have a deep love for yourself? Inventory, look at yourself. Ask yourself these very simple questions. Do I see myself as somebody very beautiful? Do I look at my body? Do I honor it? Do I respect it? Can I look at myself and see the sense of who I am? What kind of an honor and a value system do I have for me? As I learn this concept, I also begin to learn the beauty of me. You see, building a personal relationship with yourself means to be able to make peace, to be able to settle things inside of you. It's such a neat concept because it means that you feel and experience the beautiful gift of serenity. You see, in the Serenity Prayer again, the third part of it, we experience that concept. We experience that concept of, we talked about the courage to change the things I can. But in the last part of the prayer, we talk about the wisdom, the knowledge, to know the difference. Wisdom and knowledge is a beautiful word. And wisdom simply is common sense. Wisdom means to be able to be fully alive, to be able to know and be in touch with my personhood. In the 8th and 9th step, we learn to love ourselves. When's the last time you took the time to look at yourself? When's the last time you told yourself that you love you? When's the last time you treated yourself in a loving way? When's the last time you made time for you? When's the last time you actually worked on developing things that will help you in a most loving way? See, again, building a personal relationship is scary because it's something that we're not used to. We have to learn how to do this. And that means learning to nurture ourselves, learning to put ourselves in positive situations, learning to place ourselves around people and around circumstances that are healthy for us, learning to view ourselves from a positive perspective, learning to search and develop the positive things inside of us. See, again, it's this inventory and searching and development. And what's so beautiful about a relationship is that any relationship, I don't care if it's with somebody else or if it's with yourself, every relationship has to be worked on every day. Sometimes we just take ourselves for granted, and sometimes we beat ourselves up. And we have to learn that we don't need this in our life. And that's why it's so important in the 8th and 9th step, by making amends, is that no longer do I want to beat myself up. I want to experience the peace inside of me. We also learn in the 8th and 9th step how to like ourselves. See, when we talk about spirituality, and we talk about the spirituality of recovery, we are simply now learning how to like ourselves, how to build that very special relationship with us, and in doing so, to begin to experience the joy of me. You know, it's amazing, but I've said this over and over again, how important it is for us to be able to look at ourselves and say, I like me. I am at peace with me. I enjoy me. See, one of the things we do a lot is we always play a game, and the game is called people-pleasing. We must learn to stop trying to wait for people to accept us, to stop trying to please people. This happens a lot in the 8th and 9th step, because so many times what do? We want other people to accept us. We want other people to be at peace with us. We want other people to do the things that we want them to do. And in reality, they don't have to. If someone's angry at you and mad at you, then in reality, they can choose to stay that way if they want to for the rest of their life. That's their issue, not yours. You have to make peace inside of you. and again, you have to learn to let it go. Liking yourself simply means to accept the reality of you. See, when you love yourself and when you like yourself, you basically live in the reality of your own personhood. You live in the reality of yourself. You enjoy the gift of the person called you. Again, in this program, we're talking about that very special word. And you'll notice constantly throughout all the steps, as I continue this journey of simplicity and this journey of love, constantly we use the word acceptance. Accept the things of life. Look at them. What's so beautiful about this is that when you accept what's going on inside of you, then you give yourself permission to change. But if you cannot love yourself just the way you are, then you can never grow and develop, because it means you are denying the most very basic thing of life, your own personal self. Making peace and making amends simply means to look at myself and realize that I am who I am, that God has given me the talents that I have and the gifts that I have, and I am grateful for them. So as I am able to love myself and I am able to experience this beautiful gift inside of me, and then all of a sudden I begin to feel this inner peace, this inner love. We call it the inner energy, the higher power. All of a sudden my life begins to make sense. All of a sudden things begin to work for me. They tell us over and over again how important it is to have faith and to trust the universe. How important it is to be able to look at things around you and be open to them. And the more you trust and the more you're open to situations in your life, the more easy and more beautiful your life becomes. Also, as we look at the spirituality of ourself, we also then begin a very special process of learning to respect ourselves. See, again, one of the things we do not do, we do not give ourselves our own personal self-respect. A beautiful part of self-respect is to be able to realize the maturity of me, the gift of me. Also to be able to realize how special it is for me in making peace deep down inside, how special it is for me to be able to understand that I am a person and I am responsible for me. So many times we sit around and we wait for other people to take care of our responsibilities. So many times we want others to do things for us. And that's why it's so important in our recovery process that we learn to find peace. We learn to look for settlement. And we learn to accept the responsibility of our own life. What is self-respect? Self-respect means that I am responsible for who I am. I'm responsible for my behavior. And I am willing to clear up, make amends, and settle things because of the responsibility that's inside of me. Also, what I learned through this very simple program of recovery, I learned the beautiful gift of my responsibility, and I am willing to be responsible. See, in respecting yourself, you assume and you grow, and you assume the responsibility for your life. Also, in this beautiful aspect of spirituality and making amends, I am now learning how to care about myself. As I learn to care about me, what I actually begin to do is I begin to look at myself totally differently. I begin to realize the sacredness and the beauty of my body, how special it is. I begin to treat it in a very special way. I begin to honor it and respect it. I begin to realize the beauty of it, and I begin to feed it and nurture it and relax it. And I begin to realize how important life is to be lived and celebrated. See, so many of us don't know how to live. We don't know how to enjoy. We don't know how to be peaceful. Because so basically we live inside of our head instead of in our heart, instead of experiencing the beauty of the insides of us. That's why in this recovery program, especially in the 8th and 9th step, we are now learning a whole new concept of life. We are learning to build this very beautiful and special friendship with my body, with my spirit, with my mind, with every part of me. And it almost is like your life becomes an adventure. It's almost like you open yourself up. And it's almost like you now begin to discover the new parts of you and the gifts of you. This spirituality is special because in the spiritual program, I also learned how simple life is. You know what's so beautiful? So many of us complicate everything. We complicate things primarily because we kind of have gotten used to insanity and craziness. We've gotten used to all kinds of confusion. We've gotten used to all kinds of things happening to us all the time, that we have to begin to realize that we can allow beautiful things and special things to be part of us. We can also enjoy serenity, sanity, and peacefulness. It's amazing sometimes what we do. As soon as we start to experience these very beautiful and simple and nice things of life, it's almost like we have to go out and sabotage it. We have to go out and create some confusion and create some more problems. And right away, stir the kettle up. And it's almost like if we don't have something to complain about or scream about or yell about, it's almost like we have to create it. We have to find something instead of enjoying the serenity and peacefulness of life. Life is to be enjoyed. Life is to be celebrated. We forget that. And that's why it's so important to do what we call this clearance, this cleaning out. That's why it's so important to begin to look at why each and every one of us has to begin to see ourselves and work on settling things inside of us. The more things stay stirred up, the more we drive ourselves crazy. So give yourself a break. Look at yourself as a very beautiful human being, as a spiritual person, and begin to work on what these 2 steps are talking about. Work on simplifying and developing a simple philosophy and a simple concept of life. See, again, relate back to the first talk. We talked about safety and security. The more I am at peace with myself, the more I am at peace within, the safer I feel. The safer I feel, the more I will develop around me a beautiful and a safe environment. You see, I have an identity, and my identity is something very special. And there are things that are important to me. There are even objects, trinkets. There are things I hang on my wall. There are decorations that are around me. There are even my clothes, things I own, things that are part of me. They are all expressions of who I am. And what's so important is that so many of us don't give ourselves permission to have around us things that give us a sense of security, that give us a sense of love. So many of us don't give ourselves permission to begin to actually experience that beautiful, simple little concept of love inside of us. Use an example. It's a real simple one. All of us can try this. It goes back to where serenity comes from. I'd like you to visualize for a couple of seconds a little child laying in its crib, or a little boy or a little girl laying in their bedroom. You will notice something about little children. Little children usually have in their arms or around them either a little teddy bear or a little stuffed animal, and usually in their rooms they have things and objects like little toys or things to this effect. For these children, these become what we call their security blankets. As adults, ask yourself a question today, and as part of recovery, as part of making peace. Do you have your own personal little teddy bear? Do you have your own little stuffed animal? Can you give yourself permission to pick up a stuffed animal and hold it in your arms and touch it and realize how special feelings it gives you? Can you give yourself permission to look at this very little toy, as we call it, but it's not a toy because it's real? Can you give yourself permission to hold it, nurture it, let it become a loving part of you? It's so beautiful and so special because what are you doing? As you pick up that little stuffed animal, that little teddy bear, and as you hold it in your arms, you're holding yourself. You're holding your mirror. And it's the softness and the tenderness and the beauty and the specialness of that little teddy bear that teaches us about the softness and the specialness and the beauty of ourselves. And so many times it's that little gentleness of the little child. It's the trust of the little child that we work for inside of our lives. Did you ever visualize a little child laying in a crib and its mom and dad standing over the top of it? Notice the little child. The little child, when it looks up, sees these 2 very large people standing above it. And these two very large people are now going to reach down and pick this child up and hold this child in their arms. And one of the things that's so beautiful about the child is that the child feels the love, feels the energy, feels the serenity, and feels the peacefulness. You see, no one in the world can take that feeling away from us. We have a right to it. When we work in this Amends program, we learn the importance of feeling that little child, expressing that little child, letting that little child begin to become part of me. As we begin to experience it, we now begin to experience our gentleness and our beauty and our specialness. Part of this recovery process is to begin to build inside of ourselves this beautiful gift of this little child. You see, the 8th and the 9th step teaches us to become a little child. It teaches us to begin to experience the childlike qualities inside of us. And what is recovery? Recovery is going back to being that child. Recovery is being able to look at life, even your job and what you do, through the eyes of a little child. It's called simplicity and it's called innocence. And so many of us are so busy with our toughness and our macho-ness and our insanity and our craziness that we fail and we don't take time to enjoy those very special, those very beautiful little feelings that go on inside of us. It's a beautiful concept and a beautiful aspect of life. Please give yourself permission. So in the 8th and 9th step, it's extremely important to realize that these 2 steps teach us to bring peace to ourselves, to bring the child within, to heal it, to develop a beautiful sense of who we are as a person, and to begin to realize how special and how beautiful we are. As we begin to experience this beautiful child, we now are getting ready for the most beautiful part of recovery, the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th steps. These last 3 steps of the program are very special because they teach us the gratitude and the serenity. Remember that steps 4 through 9 were geared towards helping us to put things to rest, helping us to make peace, helping us to begin to experience the spirit and the spirituality within, helping us to begin to experience the little child within, and helping us to remember how special and how beautiful we are. What's so beautiful about steps 4 through 9 is they are concrete, they are real, and they actually do help us to settle things. You see, knowing who you are, grieving, releasing, making peace, making amends, learning to look at life through the eyes of common sense, learning to love, to respect, to honor, all these things are part of what these steps teach us, and they're a beautiful and a special philosophy of life. All we have to do is believe in it. These are special steps. As we conclude them, we simply ask our higher power to help each and every one of us to always look at life through the eyes of peace, and to always realize that no matter what happens in our life, we need to eventually make peace with it. If you make peace with something, it becomes your teacher. And from your teacher, you learn. From that, you grow. I hope that this step has helped you to begin to look at yourself in a more positive way. Please give yourself permission to experience the simplicity, the peacefulness, and the gentleness of being and being able to make amends and peace with yourself on the inside. Thank you.